Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Erasing the Stigma. Today, I'm so excited to be here with Rebecca Kamen, who is a former professor at the Northern Virginia Community College, and she's currently an artist in residence in the Computative Neuroscience Initiative at UPenn. So, Miss Kamen, would you be able to give listeners a snapshot of who you are?
Well, I have to start off by saying that I'm a curious person who uses art to make the invisible visible. And I came into the world wanting to know how everything worked. So as a child, I would always take things apart so I could figure out how they worked and then put them back together, usually in a very different way. But what I found out is that learning challenges early on kept me from pursuing the field of science, which I was very interested in. But the great thing about being dyslexic is the fact that I'm a much more visual learner, and it has helped me to build really exciting bridges between art and science.
That is so amazing. And I feel like art and science are usually considered as separate disciplines. So, what inspired you to fuse these two disciplines through your work? And where did you originally see the overlap between art and science?
Well, first of all, art and science have a great deal in common. Both engage creative problem solving. I spend a great deal of time, probably more time with scientists than I do with artists. And it's really been interesting for me as I visit a variety of different types of labs, from astrophysics, which is at the macro level, to the micro level of neuroscience. I find that scientists at both extremes and everything in between are all about discovering truths to the notion of aesthetics and beauty. And it's always interesting to me to attend lectures of scientists because they talk about things in terms of beauty, like a beautiful algorithm. So it was early on from these dialogues with scientists that I realized that there was this bridge between what we both do. The third thing is that we use visualization to make the invisible visible. So I might create a sculpture, I might create a drawing or a painting, but a scientist will create a beautiful algorithm, and to see the excitement on their faces as an enthusiasm as they're presenting their findings, it's very similar to the experience and joy that I have in terms of using my art to make those kinds of discoveries as well.
And like you were saying before, you are a very curious person. And I feel like that's also found in both art and science, that curiosity. But something that I find is so cool about your work is I feel like often for science, like you were saying, with different algorithms that scientists are creating, it kind of feels like for a general population that it is kind of exclusive to people who are in the field of science and really have a scientific background. However, integrating art into science is very interesting because I think anyone can appreciate art, even if they don't have a scientific background. And it makes a visualization of what a scientist might discover, and someone who might have previously felt like they couldn't appreciate the scientific discovery through your art, they can now appreciate it, which is so cool, especially for me as a person who loved both art and science. I just really think your artwork is just so unique and it's amazing. So you had mentioned that you had dyslexia. So would you give any attribution to your dyslexia for either your curiosity or your amazing creative talents?
Well, I want to just back up a little bit to another statement that you made first, um, about science sometimes being not accessible to people, but you feel that with art it is, and that's true, to a certain degree. But one of the things I want to mention that before the advent of the camera, if you go back to the 14th, 15th, and 16th century, you'll see that scientists had to be artists because it was the only way they could capture and make the invisible visible to other members in their scientific community. And I've been really fortunate in the fact that I've had access to incredible scientific archives that date all the way back. And what I found is these beautiful paintings that were not done by artists, but were done by scientists. So there's this long tradition of the sciences using art as a way of making the invisible visible. So, and scientists are not necessarily aware of that. I do a lot of lecturing in different scientific communities, and I'm always showing artwork as a way of showing the beginning of how scientific discovery was shared with other people. And I think that that is such an important point for people to realize. One of the people, Santiago Ramon y Cajal, who is considered the father of modern neuroscience, he came into the world wanting to be an artist, but his father said, "No, you have to be in medicine like me," and he really fought it. But I was granted an opportunity to go to his archive in Madrid and went through 7,000 drawings that he did. And as an art educator, which is what two of my degrees are in, I was struck by his ability to see and record at such a young age that enabled him to make the kind of discoveries he did. And in the end, looking in the microscope, hand drawing it, what he was seeing, he discovered the notion that neurons were not a reticulum. They were individual cells, and it won him the Nobel Prize. So the point that's very significant, I really believe it was his ability to be able to process what he was seeing using drawing as opposed to just taking a photograph that enabled him to make the kind of discovery he did and landed him the Nobel Prize.
Wow, that is
Yeah,
amazing.
so
Mhm.
a
Didn't know
little
that. That oh my gosh, that is so amazing. And like you were saying, I feel like definitely in science, which encompasses what you were saying, art can be shown throughout history as being profound. But I also feel like in all history, whether you're thinking of the field of science or other fields, I mean, we started off before we were writing down facts with pictorial representation, and then going to science, like you were saying, with drawing before we had pictures. So art has definitely been influential in human history. And that's just something that I am so glad that you mentioned because I'm very passionate about it when I hear that some schools are deciding to divert the fundings for the arts into other areas. And definitely other academic areas are extremely important, but art has been integrated in academics for a long time in human history. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that because I did not know the scope of how thoroughly art was integrated into science. And it's just such an important thing to remember that art does correspond with education and academics.
they create, I feel, a symbiotic relationship, and that it's very important that one enhances the other. And when I go out and I lecture to scientists, I talk about how their research has impacted my work, but I'm very interested in the history of science because when you study history, it's a continuum. You see it in relationship to other things. And being dyslexic, I mean, that's one of the ways that I learn is this. Being a visual learner, for me, it's really important to see how things interconnect. And history is such a rich repository for that.
Mhm. That is So true. And something that you mentioned, which through my work with color and confidence, I've definitely noticed that many people with language-based learning differences, one of their strains is to see the interconnectedness that other people might miss. So with you seeing how art connects to science is so profound because someone else might miss that and they might not get the full breadth of what they're researching because they don't see that interconnectedness. So that is just such a unique perspective that you bring. And I just wanted to ask you, so if we started integrating art into science on a wide scale. So, like you said, there's some scientists who do use art, but let's say in the future, every single scientist used art to um, to bolster their research. How would you think that would shape our future if we really integrated art into science?
Well, one of the downsides I see about science is it's what I say, it's very myopic. So the higher level you are in science, you have to go after grants. And if you know, and I think you know a little bit about grant writing, if with grants, you have to be very specific and you have to, you know, project certain outcomes that you're hoping to achieve. So what happens in a situation like that is it gets limiting. That's what I love about my practice. I get to practice science, but I get to practice it on my own terms. You know, I occasionally I do get grants, but you know, art grants are a little bit more accepting, or they sometimes throw a wider net than a scientific, you know, National Science Foundation grant. And actually I'm working right now with a group of scientists down at Louisiana State University who are looking at microfossil pollen as a way of understanding climate change, and actually creating these larger than life size, what I call messengers, because when you're looking at microfossil pollen, this is pollen from thousands of years ago, they are messengers about what climate was like thousands of years ago, for us to try to understand what we can do now to try to prevent this from happening. And so um, that's the other thing that I really love about working with scientists, is that they are starting to realize that by dialoguing with people like myself, it expands what they're able to see. And
Mhm.
that certainly happened with this project I've been working on at the University of Pennsylvania with what's called the Complex System Lab. And one of the things they're doing is they're looking at what goes on in the brain dealing with knowledge networking. So what gets engaged when you're looking at different types of knowledge. And this was fascinating to me because, God, I had an opportunity to take on how curiosity worked in my head. I mean, how many people get to do that? I mean, and it was incredible. And how it worked was, one of the ways I process information is through PowerPoints. So when I'm working on the development of artwork, you know, or a project, I document it with PowerPoints, all the different knowledge networking that I do that goes into the creation of a work of art. And so we did this for a whole exhibition I had last year at the university, at American University in Washington, D.C. The exhibition was called Reveal, the Art of Reimagining Scientific Discovery. And what was so interesting, this was all done during the pandemic because we were on shutdown for 2 years, but I had an exhibition, so I had to move forward. I also had an unexpected brain tumor and had brain surgery, but you know, we just powered through it. And it was amazing, even something like brain surgery and the double vision that occurred for about, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks, enabled me to go in my studio and capture with painting what I was seeing in my head with that double vision. And that became a significant component for this artwork in the exhibition. But the curiosity part was I was working with scientists who use data visualization, and they were able to take my language, what I was describing, and the visuals in my PowerPoint, and they were able to create a data visualization of all the pathways, all the knowledge network that was going on in my brain to create the work in this exhibition. And what was really wonderful is the University of Pennsylvania has an online paper, and they interviewed these scientists because they were curious what their experience was working with an artist. And they said they really felt it was so different. It really pushed them to think about their research in a way they would have never done if they would have just gone down the straight and narrow path. So I think from feedback I'm getting from scientists that I collaborate with, this is a very positive experience for them as well.
Oh my gosh, that I mean, it sounds so positive, and I am just so blown away of how you could take something as profound as a brain tumor and be able to use art to express to people what it was like to experience a brain tumor and have the double vision from the side effects of the surgery. And that I'm so glad that you are okay now, first and
Oh
foremost.
yeah,
But
it's heightened my curiosity, obviously. So that's a good thing.
yes,
And how
that
many people, someone who studies neuroscience, how cool is it that someone gets to go in your head and, sort of check it out?
that is so true. And I think that is so cool because you offer such a unique perspective to scientists. And like you were saying, it's very cool for a neuroscientist to be able to look in your head and check it out. I think a neuroscientist would say the same thing about you, how interesting it is to look at your art and see how you are able to communicate through art and push other scientists to become more creative and look at things in a way in which they previously wouldn't have looked at it. So just kudos to you. That is amazing.
Thank you. That means a great deal, especially when I look back on my journey and how challenging it was in the beginning to even just get into college.
Yes.
And, for any student who happens to be watching this, I want you to know that all things are truly possible. If you can dream it, if you can think it, you can make it happen. And if you learn differently, in my world, I think you're at much more of an advantage than regular people who just learn in a very traditional way. I mean, you have unique superpowers, and it's amazing to me. Now, granted, I'm looking at this not as a young student, trying to get through school, but looking back on my journey at a time when I was a student, we didn't even have the word dyslexia. Everyone was thought to learn in the same way. And if you couldn't learn in that silo way, you didn't get to go to college. So I was very fortunate having parents who advocated for me because my SAT scores were not good enough for me to get into college, but they really knew how much I wanted to go and teach. And so once I got into college on probation, I had to figure out a way I could make it through. And I found art because I didn't have to take math, at least at the school where I went. And the interesting thing is now I lecture about math because mathematics is and geometry is so critical to the beauty that we see in nature. Everything in nature is based on geometry. It's a visual language, and it was never, when I was a kid in school, it was always drill and kill. You had to memorize everything. If it was presented to me in the same way I present when I go out and lecture to people, I think I might have had a better relationship with mathematics, but now I love it. I mean, I talk about it all the time with scientists, so all things are possible.
That is so true, and I think your story really signifies that because, I mean, it is really night and day going from when you were younger and you were struggling in school because of your dyslexia and you weren't given the help and intervention because dyslexia wasn't recognized when you were in school, to now when you were a professor for 35 years and you're an artist in residence at UPenn. And something that I am so passionate about showing and telling all kids, and I think your story really signifies that, is that if they are struggling in school, it's not something that's wrong with them. And I feel like often, if a kid is struggling because of a learning difference and they're constantly getting Fs or B or Cs or Ds and they think that they're not smart. It's not that they're not smart. I think everyone is smart in a unique way personally, but it's just that the information isn't being presented in a way in which they understand. So it's not anything that's wrong with them. It's the way in which the information is being presented that it's wrong because it's not being inclusive. But your story shows that once you graduated out of that rigorous kind of standard and exclusive way of teaching that schools use, and you were able to adopt your own teaching or learning methods through art, you were really able to excel. And I just want all kids to know that if they are struggling in school, there's nothing wrong with them. And school is you go to school until probably 18, or if you're going to college, maybe longer. But after that, you can take your education into your own hands in the real world. And I just hope all kids know, like you came to find out, that it's not anything that's wrong with you. It's just the way in which information is being presented. And once you figure out the way in which you can understand the information in a way that works for you could be amazingly successful like you have shown. So your story is just so inspirational to me.
Well, thank you. That really means a lot, and it means a lot, being able to share it on a website like what you've created. I mean, I wish something like that would have been available when I was a child. I know for some young people, it might be hard to believe that I actually grew up before the advent of the computer. So, and that's always amazing to me. I worked on a big collaborative project in the People's Republic of China back in the late 1980s, a collaboration with a sculptor who spoke no English. I spoke no Chinese, but it was the power of art that enabled us to create this creative bridge between our cultures. And actually, that's the beginning of my interest in art science, because the Chinese developed incredible scientific discoveries. So we were working on developing a sculpture garden, or concepts for a sculpture garden that celebrated and showcased the contributions of Eastern and Western technology. And so that's when, for me, my interest in the history of science really developed, was back in the late 1980s, on a project that happened before computers. So everything were these beautiful handwritten letters, and typed in English and in beautiful Chinese calligraphy. So where there's a will, there's a way. I'm in a situation with someone I can't communicate. We just drew, we just imagined, used our curiosity to really engage and figure out strategies of how we could communicate. This was like a 7-year collaboration. And so all things are truly possible if you just believe that you can make it happen.
That is so true. And then what you were saying is very true too, because I mean, previously you were talking about how scientists can be limited in a way if they're only focusing on their research in the traditional way and they're not looking at it through that artistic lens that you offer. But that's also true in communication, like you were saying. If we just use writing and words, I mean, that can get you far, but it is limiting in a sense. And just looking at the international community, I mean, we don't all speak the same language. And I mean, you might not be able to communicate with someone else if you solely rely on writing, and you're able to use art to bridge that gap, which I think is so amazing. And I mean, I think we kind of take for granted how influential art is in our daily lives and our world. And I'm just so glad that you're here to shine light on how important art is.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, I'm like I said, I'm very excited about what you've created, still in high school, and understanding that need, of how challenging sometimes education can be. Um, but the great thing about neuroscience is, and the computer is, it's making it a lot more accessible. This notion of neurodiversity, that we all learn differently. And I love the fact that, because I do learn different. And as an artist, isn't that cool that I get to learn differently? I didn't think so when I was much younger, and it was challenging trying to get into college. But now I see that learning differently is just an enormous gift and enables me to see the world very differently
Yes.
than a lot of other people. And to me, that's as good as it gets.
Yes, that is so amazingly true. And often learning differently is seen as a negative thing, but I think that it is a positive because it offers such a unique perspective. And so, the last thing that I want to ask you is what is one thing that our listeners can do to erase the stigma behind language based learning differences and just learning differently in general?
Well, I think there's some really wonderful programs and websites. Dyslexic Advantage is one that I think is really an exciting website and program. Actually, they're actually one of the first websites I found out about dyslexia. When I was doing research myself, um, and so I think they do an absolutely comprehensive and beautiful job in making dyslexic information accessible to people, helping students. I've been very, very impressed. I'm very excited about knowing about your website, because that I can add to my basket of resources, because people a lot of times will contact me, because I'm very upfront about the fact that I am dyslexic, and see it as an advantage. And then one other thing I'd like to share, I'm very excited about. Last spring, a curator from San Francisco reached out to me and said that they were doing an exhibition at a place called Arion Press in San Francisco, an exhibition called Dyslexic Dictionary.
Oh,
And she was very excited about my work and said that they would like me to be one of the participating artists in this exhibition. And the idea is I have a little quote here that I wrote down. It says it's going to be a diverse collection of mediums and backgrounds that speak to the paradigm shift in the way society views learning differences. And one of the curators for this exhibition is Gilgis Shoney, is just an amazing designer who is also dyslexic. And so he and the other curator came up with this idea. I didn't know either of these people. They just reached out to me. I did a series of PowerPoints. They're going to be focusing for my work on this big data visualization of what goes on in my brain to make me curious. And I'm now also working with one of the doctoral students who is just incredible with data visualization, and what he's going to do, which I'm really excited about. We're starting to see about using artificial intelligence, AI, in transforming my language into visualizations as part of this exhibition. This is all new. You heard it first here. And I don't know how it's going to work. He and I are meeting on Monday, but this is what I get to do because I'm dyslexic, because my brain is wired differently. I'm just open to all possibilities. And they know that these scientists know I'm always up for anything. And so just stay tuned. I mean, they have these software programs now where you can literally speak and it generates imagery. And so I just can't wait to see what's possible with that. And if we can get it to work by the end of October when the show is, hopefully we'll be able to show one of the prototypes of this as part of the exhibition as well.
Oh my gosh. Wow, that is amazing. Oh my gosh, that is so, so cool. And congratulations on that. That's a huge project to you and everyone who's involved. Wow, that's so cool. And I just think that is so amazing that you guys have the opportunity to have this exhibition because it shines another amazing light onto learning differences and dyslexia. And I love that you said that it's because that you learn different and think different because of your dyslexia that you had the amazing opportunity to be involved in this exhibition. And that is just so wonderful, and I really hope that I'm gonna definitely stay tuned, but my listeners as well, stay tuned and stay updated on this exhibition because this is such a unique and different way to look at dyslexia. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. You know, it's interesting. Asked each person, and I don't know any of the other people in the exhibition, to select a word that they would use their practice to illustrate. And in my case, we're using the word lens because I always talk about how my dyslexia creates this unique lens for knowing.
Mhm.
And so my word is lens, and I'm absolutely excited about the fact that that's going to be my word, my
I
contribution
love
to the
that word.
exhibition.
That is such an amazing word, and that's how I love visualizing different kinds of learning differences, and not even just learning differences. I think, like, different people when you're looking at learning and education or just the way in which we understand and see the world, I always try to visualize people having different actual lens or different classes and the way in which they see the world. And that is the amazing and unique thing about how we have such a diverse society because everyone sees the world in a different way. And often differences are stigmatized, but they shouldn't be because a different lens offers a different perspective and that leads to innovation. And so that is just so important. And I think everyone who's watching this should think about their different lens and what makes their lens unique because that unique aspect of our lens that we have is so important to the innovation that we have today.
It should be celebrated.
It should be. Yes, it definitely should be. I really, really appreciate the opportunity I had to speak with you. It's been beyond amazing hearing about all the work
Thank
that you have done. And again, congratulations on all the work that you've done, but especially this upcoming exhibition. It's going to be fantastic. And I'm so excited to keep updated on your work. But I just know that the advice that you have provided with listeners is going to be very influential, so thank you.
My pleasure. You know, anything that we can help to empower others to be the change that we want to see and they want to see in the world. Congratulations to you for the exciting work that you're doing. And you're just embarking and starting your journey. So keep up the great work and much continued success.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye now.